That's what the airline agent shouted, loud enough to freeze every passenger at gate 47. But the man she was blocking wasn't an ordinary traveler. He wasn't late for a vacation. He wasn't trying to skip a line. He was a soldier, a captain, a man on the hardest mission of his life. And in his hands, he carried a folded American flag. Inside the cargo bay of that very plane was the body of Private Jacob Reeves, a 19-year-old kid who had given everything for his country. And the captain, the only person Jacob had left to bring him home, was being told he couldn't board. The agent didn't care who he was. She didn't care what he carried. She didn't care that a mother was waiting states away for the last goodbye she would ever give her son. She only cared about one thing. Your ticket is not valid. Step aside. But the captain didn't move. Not an inch. Ma'am, I am escorting a fallen soldier. I will not leave him alone. The agent called security. The crowd erupted. The pilot walked out of the jet bridge and said words that shook the gate. Then give him my seat. And what happened next changed an entire airport. Those 6 words cut through the noise of the airport like a blade. People stopped mid-stride. Conversations froze. The automatic announcement overhead suddenly felt like background static. Captain Elijah Morgan stood tall, his uniform pressed, his posture straight despite the exhaustion of the last 48 hours. But what stood out wasn't the uniform. It was the flag case he held, folded and sealed with unbearable finality. Inside the cargo bay of that very plane lay the coffin of a young soldier, Private Jacob Reeves. Elijah wasn't just traveling. He was escorting a fallen brother home. He stepped forward calmly. Ma'am, I'm the designated military escort. His remains are already loaded on this aircraft. I must fly with him. The gate agent's expression didn't change. She didn't look at the flag. She didn't look at Elijah's uniform. She simply shook her head, like she was reading from a script. Your ticket was automatically removed due to overbooking. You'll need to wait for the next flight available. Next flight. Elijah repeated quietly. I can't leave him alone. Around them, passengers began to sense something was terribly wrong. Some glanced at the flag. Others looked between Elijah and the agent, waiting for her to realize the gravity of the situation. But she didn't. Instead, she turned to her computer again. Sir, I'm asking you to step aside. You're holding up boarding. Elijah felt a fire spark in his chest, not anger, but duty. A soldier doesn't abandon another soldier. Not in life, and definitely not in death. Ma'am, he said, his voice steady but firm. Either I get on that plane, or his remains come off with me. The agent scoffed, annoyed. If you continue to refuse, we will have to call security. Passengers gasped. A few even pulled out their phones to record. But Elijah didn't flinch. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to cause a scene. He was here because a 19-year-old kid who once dreamed of going to college, who wrote letters home every Sunday, who told his mom he would come home a hero, never made it home alive. Elijah stepped forward just enough to make his resolve clear. Call them. And in that instant, the entire airport realized this wasn't a ticket issue. This was honor. Hundreds of miles away, inside a small, quiet home in rural Kentucky, Linda Reeves sat in her living room clutching a mug of untouched tea that had long since gone cold. The ticking of an old wall clock echoed through the room, each second amplifying her anxiety. Her son Jacob had been her pride, her miracle, her only child. When he enlisted, he told her, "Mom, I'll make you proud. I'll take care of us." And he meant every word. She never imagined that one day 2 officers would appear on her porch with solemn faces and trembling voices, delivering the news no mother should ever hear. Now she waited for him to come home, not walking, not smiling, but in a coffin draped with the flag he once saluted with such hope. She wasn't alone. Neighbors brought food. The church offered support. But no amount of kindness dulled the ache in her heart. At that very moment, as she straightened the framed photo of Jacob on the mantel, Elijah was standing at an airport gate being told he couldn't accompany her boy home. Inside the airport, the airline supervisor arrived, visibly irritated, and said, "Sir, you're delaying the boarding process." Elijah held the folded flag closer. "Ma'am, Private Reeves has no one else traveling with him. I am his escort. I am responsible for him." And I'm responsible for ensuring our flights depart on time, she replied sharply. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Another murmured, "That's a fallen soldier." But rules were rules, she insisted. Elijah tried again. Calm, measured, respectful. His mother is waiting. I cannot fail this duty. The supervisor stared back with cold authority. If you don't comply, we will remove you from the gate. Security was called. Passengers tensed. Some stood up. Others moved closer, forming a protective circle without even realizing it. The mood was shifting from confusion to outrage. Meanwhile, Linda sat miles away, unaware of the disrespect unfolding, unaware that her son's final journey back to her was being threatened by bureaucracy and indifference. She whispered to the photo of her boy, "You're coming home, sweetheart. They promised they'd bring you home." And Elijah, still standing firm at the gate, silently vowed, "Ma'am, I will not break that promise." Security officers arrived quickly. Two men in uniform walking briskly toward the growing crowd around the gate. One of them stopped the moment he saw Elijah's dress uniform and the flag. His voice softened instantly. "Sir, are you escorting the fallen?" "Yes," Elijah replied. The officer nodded respectfully, then turned to the supervisor. "You must let him board." "It's against policy," she snapped. "He's been bumped from the flight." The officer stared at her as if she had spoken another language. "He is escorting a fallen soldier. Policy or not, he travels with the remains." But the supervisor dug her heels in. "He can take the next flight. We have procedures." Her tone was dripping with authority, but it was misplaced, because at that moment, a passenger wearing a business suit stood up and said loudly, "He gets on this plane. Now." Another voice followed. A woman holding a baby spoke up. "Show some respect." A young college student raised his phone and announced, "I'm posting this. The whole country needs to see what's happening." Within seconds, dozens of people were echoing the same message. "Let him on. Let him on. Let him on." The chanting grew louder, bouncing off the airport walls. The supervisor's face reddened. Everyone needs to calm down. But no one was calming down. They were rising. Even the flight attendants stepped off the jet bridge to see what the commotion was about. When they learned the truth, some placed their hands over their hearts. One wiped away tears. Then the pilot emerged. Captain Avery, a man with silver hair and a calm, commanding presence, walked straight to Elijah. "Captain Morgan, you are escorting the fallen?" "Yes, sir." The pilot turned to the supervisor. "He takes my seat." "That's not allowed," she snapped. The pilot squared his shoulders. "Ma'am, I am the aircraft commander, and my aircraft will not leave this airport unless the soldier is sitting in it. Either fix the system or delay the flight." Passengers erupted in applause. The supervisor tried to argue, but she was drowned out by the chanting crowd, the determined pilot, and the unwavering presence of a soldier refusing to abandon the fallen. There was no turning back now. Respect was no longer optional, it was demanded. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, the airline senior manager rushed to the gate. His eyes widened at the sea of angry passengers, the presence of security, the pilot standing firmly beside Elijah, and the supervisor arguing with everyone. "What's happening here?" he asked. The pilot explained everything in a single sentence. "Your system removed a military escort from the flight of the soldier he's accompanying." The manager's face went pale. He immediately accessed the computer. His eyes scanned the records, and then he froze. The system had automatically bumped Elijah due to overbooking. It wasn't personal, but it was unforgivable. "This is a serious error," he said quietly. "One that should never have happened." The supervisor folded her arms. "He can still take the next flight." "No." The manager cut her off sharply. "He should have never been removed in the first place." Passengers cheered, but Elijah didn't react. He stood silently, respectfully, waiting, not for applause, but for permission to continue his duty. The manager cleared his throat. "Captain Morgan, we deeply apologize. A seat will be assigned to you immediately." The pilot shook his head. No need. He is sitting beside me in the cockpit jump seat. The manager hesitated. Jump seat access required authorization, but with the pilot's insistence, he approved it immediately. Then he turned to the crowd. To everyone here, we sincerely apologize for what happened today. This was not representative of our values. But the crowd wasn't interested in corporate apologies. They were focused on Elijah. When boarding resumed, every passenger stepped aside as he walked through the gate, almost like an honor guard formed by everyday people. Some bowed their heads. Some whispered, "Thank you." Some placed hands over their hearts. Even the security officers saluted as he passed. Elijah didn't smile, didn't nod. He simply walked with quiet dignity, carrying the folded flag with both hands. Before entering the jet bridge, he paused, turned toward the crowd, and saluted. The terminal fell into absolute silence. That moment, raw, emotional, unforgettable, became the kind of story people would tell for years. The day strangers stood together to defend honor. Because when respect is denied, good people rise. The plane touched down 3 hours later on a small runway in Kentucky. The pilot made an announcement before landing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are transporting a fallen service member. Out of respect, we ask all passengers to remain seated until the escort exits the aircraft." No one argued. No one complained. No one even reached for their bags. As the doors opened, Elijah stood and walked slowly down the aisle. People bowed their heads. Some wiped tears. A little boy pressed his hand to his chest as Elijah passed. Outside, the airport staff had created an honor corridor. Flags lined the tarmac. 6 volunteer veterans stood at attention. And at the front, Linda Reeves. Her hands trembled as she held a single white rose. When Elijah approached her, he gently extended the folded flag. "Ma'am," he said, voice soft but steady, "I brought your son home." Linda's eyes filled instantly. She placed her hand over the flag, her fingertips shaking. "You didn't leave him alone, thank you." Elijah swallowed hard. "No soldier is ever left behind. Not while I still breathe." Linda closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then she whispered, "He always looked up to soldiers like you." As Jacob's coffin was brought out, Linda stepped forward and laid the white rose on top. Elijah stood beside her in complete silence, honoring both the mother and the fallen son. The crowd behind them didn't move. The pilot stood at attention. Passengers from the flight watched with tears rolling down their cheeks. Even the airline manager, who traveled on a later flight to personally apologize, lowered his head in respect. The coffin was carried to the waiting hearse with full honors. Every step was slow, deliberate, sacred. When the doors shut, Linda turned to Elijah. "Will you be joining us at the service?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll stay until he's laid to rest." A mother smiled through her tears. A soldier fulfilled his duty. A young man finally came home. And an airline, along with everyone who witnessed the events, was forever reminded. Honor isn't a policy. It's a choice. And today, one soldier chose it when it mattered most. And so, after all the chaos, all the arguments, and all the people who took a stand, the young soldier finally came home. His mother placed a trembling hand on the folded flag, whispering, "Thank you for not letting him make that last journey alone." Captain Elijah Morgan stood at attention until the hearse doors closed. No cameras, no applause, just pure respect. Because in the end, it wasn't about airline policies. It wasn't about seats or tickets. It was about honor, a mother's grief, a soldier's promise, and a simple truth. Heroes never walk their final road alone, not while another hero still stands.